Okay, so we're back talking with Svitlana Zalischuk from Center UA in Ukraine. Here we are in Warsaw. That is the main soccer stadium in the background, actually. Svitlana, talk to us a little bit about the way the Euromaidan protests arose, and in particular, the role of social media, the role of people being connected to each other by Facebook or by text message. I mean, how much of this movement was enabled or powered by technology?
This movement actually started in Facebook, and no one could ever imagine that it would be such a massive uprising, such powerful protests against our authoritarian regime. And when on 21st of November, one journalist wrote at his Facebook that it's time to go to the main square of Kiev and just to say that we don't agree with the politics of the government.
Mm-hmm.
And there were like 1,000 likes of that post.
Mm-hmm.
And we said, okay, so let's go there, let's support him. And then all of a sudden we understood that thousands and thousands of people
Was he a very
coming.
famous journalist?
He was a famous journalist,
Mm-hmm.
and he was trustworthy. And in Ukraine, journalists are most first is church is most trustworthy, and then media. The institutions, it's very trustworthy in Ukraine. And it's interesting to the contrary of other political institutions like parliament, government, police, army, and so on and so forth. So he was a very powerful agent of influence, and then people decided not to go from the streets. They stayed during the night, and all of a sudden they understood, okay, if they don't go, we have to help them because it was already cold, so we need some tea, we need some food, we need some clothes, and that's how the whole structure started to evolve. And a lot of volunteers came and said, okay, I'm ready to serve you with teas, and I brought some soup, and I can bring you some clothes. So this is how it started. And then, as you know, Ukraine was one of the countries where TV channels belonged to the oligarchs, and all oligarchs used to be the puppets of the president, former president Yanukovych. So we didn't have much of the channels to spread the messages and to spread our communication. So social networks defined.
Is everybody on the internet here in Ukraine?
Approximately 50% of people are on the internet, and we have Facebook is approximately 3 million people out of 46 million of Ukrainians. So it was pretty powerful, like a small TV channel. The same day, one guy just created this page that's called Euromaidan. He came to us, to our organization, because we are pretty famous for doing new media, and said, I need help, I can't cope with all the news and everything. So we created a small team, and then how it started. So we worked from that moment on, we worked 24/7 for last already 3 months. And in just several days, this Facebook page obtained the historically record followers and people who joined it and people who started spread the messages and self-organized through that platform.
Yes.
And it's very important that social networks became not only the channels of the communication, because we couldn't talk to media, because there were not that much free media, but also it became a platform of putting together needs and proposals. For example, if some said, I have 5 cars and I can serve for any purposes you need, please contact me, and this is my number. And we knew that, for example, as a moderators of that page, that okay, this group that SOS Euromaidan, for example, that are helping to people who are wounded or beaten in the streets, they need these cars to bring people from the streets to the hospitals. So we put this together, and it worked very well. And then many other things, like hundreds of needs that you can't even imagine in a peaceful time that they can emerge. And this is how it worked. So I would say that social networks, and it's also another point which is very interesting, that in countries like European countries, or even in the democratic countries, I think that social networks do not play that particular role, because you have the whole diversity of free media that can be used. But in oppressed societies, with society where you don't have free access to media, they are decisive channels for communication.
Yeah. So I want to ask you one more thing. The most, I think, unique aspect of the Maidan revolution, if you can call it that, similar in many ways to mass protest movements we've been seeing spreading all over the world, from Egypt, Turkey, the Indignados in Europe, Brazil, Occupy. In all these places we see people who are unhappy about political and economic conditions in their country knitting themselves together through social networks and social media to take a square and hold it for a while. But only in Kiev have we seen this phenomenon of the sotny, of people who formed self-defense units that were literally ready to take much more physical violence and were much more disciplined about holding places. It was a unit of sotny that took, for example, Yanukovych's palace and then didn't let it get looted, which was very interesting. So what is this phenomenon of the sotny, and where does it come from, and how did it arise in this case here? Do you know the story?
It's a very interesting phenomena in general, and I think we still have to describe it in details in order to spread the message, spread the experience to other countries that are still to uprise, But and you're right, it was one of the most well organized unit that were ready to defend the whole protest in the heart of Kiev. And Sotnya, the name itself, the etymology goes from 16th century and from Cossack time, so-called, when these men formed. It was the name of the military units during that time. This very authentic word, and people. Let me just notice that it didn't emerge right in the very beginning of Euromaidan. For a couple of months, I have to say, we had this feeling that it's going to be very peaceful protest, and a drop of blood is going to be shed, because we lived through one revolution already in 2005. It was Orange Revolution, when none was even beaten, in the streets. So we believed we are able to repeat this story, but this government turned out to be much more cruel and much more just ruthless, at some point people understood that police is not going to treat us as peaceful Protestants. So men who were ready to defend the whole protest, our Euromaidan, they formed these units, so-called self-defense units, and they had these proof bullet vests. They had these helmets. They had some.
Just a short announcement: everybody that wants to use SSH or any other service than HTTP, now the ports are unblocked on the Wi-Fi, but you have to use the Wi-Fi for network. Okay, it will not work on any other network. The Wi-Fi for network now has all the ports unblocked, and you can use you can use SSH or whatever to your heart's content. Cheers.
I hope these guys will come up with good ideas for next protests in other countries,
Yeah.
Okay, so coming back to the Sotnyas, we believe that, yes, they formed at some point these units, and they just took this responsibility to protect the protests on the perimeter of the streets where we were standing, and they protected us during the night, especially when police was...
People welcomed them.
Oh yes, because once again, it was not specially trained. Most of them were not specially trained sportsmen or I don't know, people from army or whatever. These were activists, journalists, sometimes professors, artists, musicians, and so on. It was just men who decided, okay, this is my role. Not always. There were some women. Of course, men didn't allow women to come there, but still they were there. And I mean, I was also there during these nights when they killed people, and it was at some point you just, you know, you stop taking it as if it's something happening like in a movie, you know.
Yeah.
It just, you see people who are dying, you see wounded people in your very lovely, peaceful country, lovely city, and this coldness moves from your head to your heart, and you just accept as it is, and you think that, okay, there's no other choice, there's no other way, we're gonna stand it here until the last moment.
Mm-hmm. Last question though about the role of the Sotny and the street in relation to the politics of this movement. Because at a certain point the opposition parties stepped in and started, you know, negotiating a little bit with, playing this kind of role with the government, but the street was also having a voice, right?
Yes, it's very interesting that this protest was not about changing the faces, but it was about changing the rules. And it's very important message. So people who were standing, let's say crowd protesters, they were not quite supporting all that opposition leaders were doing, but there was a special social contract, if you want, between crowd and a stage. Because we understood, of course, as protesters, that we are not going to run for either presidential or parliamentary elections. It's politicians going to do that. But we showed them that, okay, if you stand in front of us at this stage and we support here, we have a common mission to change the country, to get rid of this authoritarian government, to establish, to propose to the country a new, fair and free elections. We're going to make the situation, the conditions for you to be accountable, and they accepted it. They understood that they can't repeat the destiny of Yanukovych or the former president. If they stand there on the stage, they understand that their future role will be to bring new rules into the country.
The people are still holding the square?
There are people who are holding the square, and we decided that we're not going to go until the presidential elections that are planned for the 25th of May.